Swalwell has left the Democrat presidential race, which means the field has been reduced to everyone except Eric Swalwell, who once declared, "I am you," which means that by leaving the race, all of us have left the race and the field is empty. This means that everyone and no one are running for the Democrat presidential nomination at the same time, an existential paradox which scientists say could either destroy the universe or reduce the Democrats to a party of toxic, America-hating socialists spinning out completely unworkable ideas while viciously accusing one another of thought crimes against their radical dismantling of universal human norms. In other words, things would remain pretty much the same as they are now, and Swalwell leaving the race will have no effect on anything. Swalwell said he had decided to step down to do something more useful than running for president, like, for instance, digging a big hole in the ground, throwing in all his supporters' money, and then setting it on fire in order to roast marshmallows. Swalwell said that way he would at least get some roasted marshmallows out of burning all his supporters' money. Swalwell says now that he's out of the race, his proposals will no longer take effect, and he will be returning all the guns he confiscated in his imagination. Gun owners were grateful to have their imaginary guns returned to them and said as a result, they would stop imagining shooting Eric Swalwell and anyone else who imagines taking their guns. Some gun owners said they had already imagined staging a second American Revolution in order to restore the rights guaranteed them by the Constitution, and promised that now that Swalwell was stepping down, they would imagine returning the Capitol building to the civil authorities and imagine rebuilding the White House, which they had imagined burning to the ground. In stepping down, Swalwell thanked his supporters, saying, quote, "I am you and you are me, so therefore when you support me, no one supports me but me, and that's why I'm stepping down." Trigger warning. I'm Andrew Klavan, and this is The Andrew Klavan Show.
I feel hunky-dunky, life is tickety-boo. Birds are winging, also singing hunky-dunky-doo. Ship-shaped ipsy-topsy, the world is zippity-zing. It's a wonderful day, hurrah, hooray, it makes me want to sing. Oh, hurrah, hooray, oh, hooray, hurrah.
I don't know about you, but I have been redoing the security in my home, and I've noticed all around my neighborhood there are signs going up that there's license plate recognition and video cameras and all this. Ring's mission is to make neighborhoods safer. And you might already know about their smart video doorbells and cameras that protect millions of people everywhere. They also have alerts that will turn on spotlights around your house to make sure that you can see who's out there and talk to them. I've told you about our pal Jay, who has ringed his house with these devices after being approached in the middle of the night by a couple of people that he was able to see and talk to and chase away through his Ring doorbell. Ring helps you stay connected to your home anywhere you are. So if there's a package delivery or surprise visitor, you'll get an alert and be able to see, hear, and speak to them all from your phone, thanks to the HD video and two-way audio features on Ring devices. As a listener, you have a special offer on a Ring starter kit available right now with a video doorbell and motion-activated floodlight cam. The starter kit has everything you need to start building a ring of security around your home. Just go to ring.com/Klavan. That's ring.com/Klavan. And anyone comes to your house. You say, "How do you spell Klavan?" And if they know, call the police. Now, there's an old expression attributed to many different people. History is written by the victors. But in America, that's not true. In America today, history is being rewritten by people who have never been victorious in anything, who have never achieved anything except the power to rewrite history. Leftists who live in the freedom won for them by men like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson are seeking to erase men like Washington and Jefferson from our memories and our reverence. They paint over murals depicting them, demand to remove their statues, stop celebrating their birthdays. They condemn the human failings of these great men who risked everything to give us the liberty in which we move and have our being. Why are they doing that? What's the point? Surely the ultimate target of the left is freedom itself. They don't want us to revere the all-too-human heroes who shattered the norm of top-down rule and replaced it with the American ideal of individual liberty and localized governance because they want to put you all back in chains. They want to put you in the chains of a government that gives you everything and so has the power to control your words, your thoughts, and your actions by what it grants and withholds. This brings me to alleged crap stain Jeffrey Epstein, who has been arrested again for allegedly raping and pimping allegedly underage girls like the alleged scumbag he allegedly is. As I sit here talking, Epstein's Wikipedia entry is being rewritten to edit out Epstein's good pal and frequent companion, Bill Clinton. Epstein's longtime support of the Democrat Party is being left unmentioned in news stories. Malfeasance by Democrat prosecutors in Florida is being overlooked, and Labor Secretary Alex Acosta is being set up as the sole scapegoat and fall guy for Epstein's unfathomably widespread alleged history of inhuman abuse. And that's mostly because Acosta provides a tenuous connection between Epstein and, you guessed it, Donald Trump. Now, I'm not exonerating Trump of anything. He hung out with Epstein somewhat, and maybe he joined in the satanic fun. I don't know. But this is a story we should watch carefully, because through this story, we'll be able to determine who among our journalists and politicians cares for the truth and who only cares for power, because only the truth tellers should be trusted with our news, with our history, and with our freedom. And you're already watching these people fall out. Let's talk about this story a little bit. I just want to read you from the Wall Street Journal. Financier Jeffrey Epstein was indicted in New York on federal sex trafficking charges stemming from an alleged scheme to exploit underage girls, another chapter in a lurid legal drama that has surrounded the politically connected money manager for years. So he was brought into court yesterday. He was wearing his his jail outfit. He said he looked disheveled, but calm. This was after he was arrested Saturday at Teterboro Airport, which is in Jersey. He was coming back from Paris on his private jet. So he's really been, his lifestyle has really been disturbed by all this. They are charging that the latest charges are that he drew underage girls to his townhouse in New York and to his place in, I believe, Palm Springs, Florida. And it would have them give him massages, and the massages, of course, turned sexual. And then, let me put on Jeff Berman, the U.S. attorney in New York, talking about what else Epstein did.
Epstein also paid certain victims to recruit additional girls to be similarly abused. This allowed Epstein to create an ever-expanding web of new victims. This conduct, as alleged, went on for years, and it involved dozens of young girls, some as young as 14 years old at the time that they were allegedly abused. As alleged, Epstein was well aware that many of his victims were minors, and not surprisingly, many of the underage girls that Epstein allegedly victimized were particularly vulnerable to exploitation. The alleged behavior shocks the conscience. And while the charged conduct is from a number of years ago, it is still profoundly important to the many alleged victims, now young women. They deserve their day in court, and we are proud to be standing up for them by bringing this indictment.
Now, it always gets me about these guys. The guy's virtually a billionaire. I mean, has hundreds of millions of dollars. Given the way the world is, I'm sure he could have hot and cold running 18-year-olds all he wanted. Why these guys cannot keep their hands off children, I do not know. I believe the town that I'm sitting in now, the town of Los Angeles, I believe that young people of both sexes are being continually abused right beneath the level of our eyes, and that nobody's covering the story. Again and again, these child actors come out and say they've been abused, and that it makes it into the trades a little bit and into the LA Times, and then it disappears because all these people are dependent on these powerful people to give them ads. But I just think that this abuse of children, the powerful people's abuse of children, and many of the people helping Epstein were women. So it's not just men. It is just this absolute use of the abuse of the least powerful people. It is sadistic in the literal meaning of that word, meaning the Marquis de Sade would have very much approved of this. This is what he thought a world without God should look like, that powerful people sexually taking pleasure off the weakest people and the most vulnerable people. And that's the story. And what makes this such a big story is the connectedness of this guy. He had black books that had more than 1,000 names with close friends like Lex Wexner, who was the founder of Victoria's Secret, a big businessman. There was Prince Andrew from the UK. Members of the Trump family made appearances in there, and there was even an entry for the main number to the White House. We know that Bill Clinton was on his plane that was called, disgustingly, the Lolita Express, Lolita being, of course, the famous novel by Vladimir Nabokov, a great novel about a man who is in love with a child, essentially, sexually attracted to a child. The names also in his black book included well-known performers, including Ralph Fiennes, Alec Baldwin, David Blaine, Jimmy Buffett, and Courtney Love, media figures including Charlie Rose, Mike Wallace, and Barbara Walters, former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, industrialist David Koch, and the late Salman Brothers Chief Executive Officer John Gutenfreund and his wife Susan. Now, that's not saying they had all, now, please, this is not saying that those people had done anything wrong. It's just that that's how connected he was. We don't know all the people who traveled with him. Here is one of the very good investigative journalists who've been covering this case and keeping it alive, despite the fact that prosecutors dropped it more than a decade ago. And we'll get back to that. That's an important part of the story. But here's Miami Herald investigative reporter Julie K. Brown talking about the fact that a lot of people are nervous with this indictment.
Well, I felt a lot of pressure. Needless to say, these are very powerful people, and I think that they're sweating a little bit, especially today. We don't know how much, how deep this went, how far reaching it went in government, but there's been a lot of people that, I could see their names on these message pads on a regular basis as part of the evidence. These message pads where they would call Epstein and leave messages such as, I'm at this hotel, why do you do that? Except that you're expecting him perhaps to send a girl to visit you at your hotel. So there's probably quite a few important people, powerful people who are sweating it out right now. We'll have to wait and see whether Epstein's going to name names or what kind of information he's going to try to trade to, maybe get out of this in some way or lower his culpability.
I mean, this is, as far as I'm concerned, the story. The story is who was participating in this. What she's saying there is that, you come to town and you just get on the horn to old Jeff and tell him that you're in a hotel and some 13-year-old girl is sent over like some plate of food or something like this. Who was doing that? I mean, how wide a range, how powerful are these people, how high up do they go? We do know that Trump at one point made some kind of remark about him being a great guy who loves beautiful women as much as he does, and some of these women are young. But he also is said in court documents to have banned him from Mar-a-Lago, his resort, because Epstein assaulted an underage girl. I mean, I'm laughing in the sense of shaking my head here, that this is who this guy was, that this guy was so powerful and operated basically with impunity with so long. But the stories that go on, the reason I just think it's a big story, it's not it's obviously an interesting story that some rich guy did this, but what makes it such a big story is all the people who were connected. This lady, Vicky Ward, who was a writer for Vanity Fair and is now a New York Times investigative reporter, she said she worked on the story, and Graydon Carter, big friend of Bill Clinton's, edited out the story about young girls. So she was doing a kind of profile of Epstein. Where did his money come from? It's kind of mysterious. He came along so fast. By the time he was 40, he had just made this incredible fortune off hedge funds, and he was kind of out in front of the hedge fund movement, I guess. And Graydon Carter edited out the young women from the story, the underage women from the story. Vicky Ward says she burst into tears when he did it, and she said, "Why are you doing it?" And Graydon Carter said, he's sensitive about the young girls, but we still get to tell the story, and basically, decapitated the tale. I mean, just basically covered up for this guy in Vanity Fair, magazine that has been dedicated to basically covering up for Clinton and promoting all things Democrat for all this time. And if that's how far they're going, I'm sorry, you have a right to support Democrats. Of course you do. You have a right to support Republicans. But no, you do not have a right to sacrifice these young girls, these vulnerable young girls, on the altar of your desire for power. I mean, that is stepping over the line. And again, I'm not exonerating Donald Trump. I don't know what he did. He's said to have gone on one of the flights, but Bill Clinton was on these flights something like 26, 27 times, all right? And Clinton releases a statement. His people release a statement. President Clinton knows nothing about you got to love the guy. He never changes, right? I did not have sex with those 550 underage women. President Clinton knows nothing about the terrible crimes Jeffrey Epstein pleaded guilty to in Florida some years ago, or those with which he has been recently charged in New York. The statement from the Clinton spokesman says, in 2002 and 2003, President Clinton took a total of 4 trips on Jeffrey Epstein's airplane, one to Europe, 1 to Asia, and 2 to Africa, which included stops in connection with the work of the Clinton Foundation, an already dodgy group. Now, a investigative reporter for the Alliance to Rescue Victims of Trafficking, Conchita Sarnoff, says almost every time that Clinton's name is on the pilot logs, there are underage girls there. And there are initials and there are names of many, many girls on that private plane. Joe Lockhart, Clinton's former press secretary, was on CNN, and they asked him about Clinton, and you will hear what he does. He immediately makes a very mealy-mouthed excuse and then diverts to Donald Trump, which is the strategy that I'm getting to.
On the Clinton matter, I stay in touch with the foundation. And I know, to clear up the trips versus the flights, I think the number was 26 or 27. Each of these trips, and I've been on many of these trips where you go to Asia or you go to Africa, and each flight is counted. So each trip will be 6 or 7 different flights. I know most of the Clinton circle. Jeffrey Epstein's not part of it. I've never met the guy. I've met most of the president's friends. But all of this should come out. The New York DA, Cy Vance, he should answer questions about why he wasn't registered as what they call a level 3 sexual offender. The really striking thing for me, though, with this administration is there's no discussion at all about the underlying behavior. There's no one questions Alex Acosta's judgment in letting this guy go through. It's all about, well, will this look bad on the president?
So Alex Acosta was the federal prosecutor, the U.S. attorney in Florida, who arranged a very light deal for Epstein over a decade ago and is now labor secretary. And so this is the strategy here, is to deflect everything onto Acosta so that they can link it to Trump. And I'm going to get back to him in a minute. But here's the thing. This guy, Epstein, was a big Dem donor, right? This is from the website Open Secrets. From 1989 up until 2003, Epstein donated more than $139,000 to Democratic federal candidates and committees, and over $18,000 to Republican candidates and groups, according to data from Open Secrets. Notable recipients include former President Bill Clinton, former Senator Bob Packwood, a Republican, and in 2003, a couple of years before a full-scale investigation into the allegations of sexual exploitation of underage girls, his political giving abruptly stopped. From 1999 to 2003, Epstein donated $77,000 to Democrats John Kerry, Richard Gephardt, Chris Dodd, and other high-profile politicians and committees. Dodd received a $1,000 contribution for Epstein during his re-election campaign in 2003. However, the contribution was returned in 2006. After a hiatus in political giving during the investigations into his sexual abuse, Epstein gave to independent Connecticut House candidate Gwendolyn Beck and U.S. Virgin Islands Democratic delegate Stacey Plaskett, both in 2016 and most recently in the midterms. Most recently, Epstein contributed $10,000 to the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. It was swift. This is in 2018. It was swiftly returned by the committee 4 days later. Christine Pelosi, of course, Nancy Pelosi's daughter, but also a Democrat strategist, she tweeted out, this is the one honest thing anybody has said, as far as I'm concerned. This is the one honest remark. This Epstein case is horrific, and the young women deserve justice. It is quite likely that some of our faves are implicated, like our favorites are implicated, but we must follow the facts and let the chips fall where they may, whether on Republicans or Democrats. Okay, now that's an honest statement, and praise to her for saying it. Good on her for saying it. But listen to the way the New York Times led with this, all right? They found when they raided Epstein's house, they found all these photographs of girls, naked girls, some of whom the prosecutors say are underage. And so, I mean, a good indication that Epstein hasn't changed his ways, that he's not a reformed character. They're arguing that this was a bail hearing yesterday. They're arguing that he shouldn't be given bail because the guy owns 2 private jets. He has houses all around the world. He's a flight risk. He can disappear just like Roman Polanski disappeared and has never been brought to justice. And they're saying Epstein could do the same thing. and he was, and obviously hasn't reformed. So here's the New York Times lead, all right? This is the first two paragraphs. A trove of lewd photographs of girls discovered in a safe inside the financier Jeffrey Epstein's Manhattan mansion the same day he was arrested is deepening questions about why federal prosecutors in Miami had cut a deal that shielded him from federal prosecution in 2008. Federal prosecutors in Manhattan charged Mr. Epstein on Monday with sex trafficking, dealing, and implicit rebuke to that plea agreement, which was overseen by Alexandra Acosta, then the United States Attorney in Miami, and now President Trump's labor secretary. So Bill Clinton, I don't think appears in this story at all. Yesterday, Clinton was down around the 11th paragraph. I lost count. He was down so low. The whole thing is to lay this on Acosta. So what happened with Acosta? Acosta, the local Democrat authorities, and I believe it was Palm Springs, brought a case against Epstein and then dropped it in the federal people's laps. Now, the secret deal that they arranged gave Epstein something like 18 months in prison, of which he served in jail, of which he served 13 months. And during that time, he was allowed out. He was allowed to go to work. So it wasn't exactly what you would call the worst, the worst case ever. It wasn't a terrible thing he suffered. He himself compared it to being, he was not called a sex. He said that the way he was charged was the difference between being called a murderer and being accused of stealing a bagel. In other words, he pleaded down to almost nothing. Okay. Now, Tim Kaine, when Acosta was up for confirmation as labor secretary, asked him about it and did a good job questioning about it. I'm going to play a fairly long clip in which Acosta explains from his point of view what happened.
This matter was originally a state case. It was presented by the state attorney to the grand jury in Palm Beach County. The grand jury in Palm Beach County recommended a single count of solicitation not involving minors, I believe, and that would have resulted in 0 jail time, 0 registration as a sexual offender, and 0 restitution for the victims in this case. The matter was then presented to the U.S. Attorney's Office. It is highly unusual, and as I was speaking to some of your colleagues that have been involved in prosecutions, they mentioned that they don't know of any cases personally where a U.S. attorney becomes involved in a matter after it has already gone to a grand jury at the state level. In this case, we deemed it necessary to become involved. And we, early on, had discussions within the office. And we decided that, that a sentence, or how should I put this, that Mr. Epstein should plead guilty to 2 years, register as a sex offender, and concede liability so the victims could get restitution.
Okay, so what he's saying, I know that's a long cut, but what he's saying, it's Palm Beach in Florida, obviously, not Palm Springs, I keep saying, but it's Palm Beach. What he's saying is the Democrats who ran Palm Beach, went into a grand jury and came out with bupkis. So we don't know, obviously, what happens in a grand jury. That's secret, but they came out with nothing. And it didn't involve a young person, as far as he could remember. It was a 1-count indictment, which he said would not have allowed the victims to get restitution. So they dumped what the police call a bag o' crap onto this guy, onto the federal prosecutors, which, as he said, is not the way it's usually done. It's not done that the local prosecutors take it and then they dump it on the federal prosecutors. And obviously what Acosta is saying there is this was the best he could get out of the garbage case they gave to him. So I'm not defending anybody. I'm simply saying that when you put Acosta at the center of this, and now the latest headline on the Wall Street Journal online is that Democrats are calling for Acosta to resign. In other words, all of this is going to be an attempt to get at Donald Trump again. Well, we know how these work out because we know that the Democrats, I mean, when the Me Too movement started, they thought, oh boy, we've got Donald Trump now, and who's gone down instead? I mean, it's been almost all Democrats, from Harvey Weinstein to the guys in the press, Charlie Rose, all those people in the press who got caught, Matt Lauer. These were all pro-Democrat reporters. They all got caught. Al Franken. I mean, look, men are men and they do bad things to women when they can get away with it, when they have power and no conscience. We know they do these things, and it doesn't matter which side they're on. However, it is interesting that the Me Too movement has swept so many powerful Democrats away, and that it is being stalled in places like, for instance, Virginia, where they don't want to lose Democrat politicians. Suddenly the Me Too movement goes away. And so this is going to be an interesting case because, if you click on, here's an article from Red State. If you click on Wikipedia, he says, upon clicking on Epstein's bio on Wikipedia, you'll be treated to various facts about his life, such as the fact that he was good friends with Clinton, as well as disgraced actor and sexual assaulter Kevin Spacey. In fact, it details that Clinton had been on Epstein's private plane 26 times. Or at least that's what you would have seen if you had pulled up Epstein's page at around 8:30 this morning. According to some eagle-eyed Twitter users, the page was edited sometime between then and 10:30 this morning, with the connections to Clinton and Spacey now completely gone. Twitter user Desiree Mills posted the screenshots to Twitter. As you can see, it seems Wikipedia, this is the tweet, seems Wikipedia has altered Epstein's bio already. First screenshot of Epstein's bio was at 8:27 a.m. The second was at 10:30 a.m., omitting Bill Clinton and Spacey, yet leaving Trump. That is frightening. Same exact bio of Epstein, only different. The Red State article goes on. It is unclear who is editing the page, but it should be noted that anyone can edit the page with the right login. Some pages on Wikipedia are locked and unable to be altered by the public, sometimes for this very reason. However, if the page suddenly does become locked with the information subtracted from Epstein's page, we'll know that it wasn't just randoms on the internet looking to separate Democrats from something Democrats have recently been known to do, and that's involve children in sex. And I mean, this is something, I've been hitting social media for this. Twitter, yesterday, I posted a joke on Twitter because I believe it was Vox ran this absurd story about what a nightmare it would be if we went to war with Iran. Now, I don't want war with Iran. I think so far Donald Trump has done a really good job of avoiding war with Iran as Iran tries to hold us hostage in order to get back the Obama deal that allowed them to fund so much terrorism while secretly developing nuclear weapons. That's what they want to get back. And Trump has been rattling his saber and fighting back against that. I don't want war with Iran, but this article was so dumb about what a long, drawn-out war with Iran would be that I posted, or maybe we just wipe them off the face of the earth in 15 minutes and the world would be a better place. And so I was accused of genocide. I got a note from Twitter this morning saying, we received a complaint about you, but we found that you didn't violate any rules. Well, Twitter, bite me. I'm going to make jokes. You want to throw me off Twitter, you'll save part of my life as far as I'm concerned. But this idea of manipulating history as it's happening goes very, very deep, because they're not just manipulating the history of the moment, they're manipulating our actual history. I want to show you something that is so deeply complex and ironic that it could really come out of a novel, all right? We're talking about the editing of history, and we're talking about the fact that if you don't care about truth, it is likely all you care about is power, all right? And so we all know that Donald Trump is alleged to have said that there were good people on both sides of the nightmarish Charlottesville violence, in which Nazis and white supremacists battled fascists called Antifa. So as far as I'm concerned, it was a bunch of dirtbags fighting each other, but it was one of the people who was against the fascists who was ultimately killed, a woman who was ultimately run down by some nutbag in a car. Obviously, an ugly, ugly story. But underneath that story was a local story that had been commandeered by these creeps, okay? It was a local story about renaming a park and taking down a statue of Robert E. Lee. And when Donald Trump said there were good people on both sides, we know that we know for a fact that he was referring to people on both sides of the statue question, okay? Now, here's a clip of that press conference when he said that, when he started talking about taking down the statues of the statue of Robert E. Lee and why he didn't agree with it, why he thought it was a dangerous precedent.
Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him? Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner. Now, are we going to take down his statue? So you know what? It's fine. You're changing history, you're changing culture, and you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly.
This is a moment of novelistic complexity, right? Because that quote was rewritten to mean that Trump was a friend of white supremacists. They're still using it. Joe Biden used it when he started his ridiculous campaign to lose the presidency. He used that quote saying, this is a guy who says there are good people in the fascist movement, in the white supremacist movement, which he clearly is clearing up right there. But at the same time, he is talking about, so that moment was rewritten by the press while he was talking about the effort to rewrite history. And when he said that about comparing Lee and saying, what about Washington? What about Jefferson? The New York Times, the Rolling Stones, I was joking about this in the Open yesterday, Time Magazine, they all just jumped on him. And the headline in the New York Times was, historians question Trump's comments on Confederate monuments, because the New York Times hasn't got the guts to come out and say it themselves. They attribute it. They get themselves some liberal historians and they attribute it to them. I'll get back to this in a minute. I got to say goodbye to Facebook and YouTube. Come over to dailywire.com, subscribe. It's the mailbag tomorrow. I forgot to mention that. I got to remember to mention the mailbag. Wait, that's why I don't do it. That's why I don't mention it, because I just can't stand the screaming anymore. The mailbag is tomorrow. If you got to subscribe, or you can't be in the mailbag, right? But if you subscribe, you can climb into the mailbag where it's a little stuffy, but you can ask me any question you want. Go to dailywire.com, hit the podcast button, hit the Andrew Klavan podcast, hit the little picture of the mailbag, because we don't want you to have to read too much. Hit the picture of the mailbag, and you can ask about religion. You can ask about your personal problems. You can ask about politics, and all my answers are guaranteed 100% correct and will change your life for the better. It's only $10. I mean, what do you want for a lousy $10 a month? Lousy $100 for the year. I change your life. That's enough. That's enough that I change your life. I don't have to change it for the better. We'll get back to this conversation in just a minute.